Greetings, everyone, and welcome to From the Dust of History, a production of the Biblical History Center. I'm your host, Ben Stevens, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Christy Barker, our Director of Programming, and Emily Pritchett, the Lead Program Director. We have some fascinating topics lined up for you today. The first of which we're going to cover is the mysterious Golan Stone Circle. There's also a recent unearthing of coins that have been found in the Netherlands. And finally, we'll be talking about a bathhouse in Pompeii. So let's go ahead and dive in. First up, as I said, the Golan Stone Circles. Emily, you're our resident archaeologist and an expert on such matters. So, what is this site?
So, geography wise, where we are at is the Golan Heights. This is a highly contested region between Israel and Syria. Some parts of Israel claim it, some parts of Syria claim it. So it's a very highly contested area. The border is kind of like a what if here. But there are lots of studies that have been done by one of the universities in Israel. I think it's Tel Aviv University. And what they've been doing here at the site, which is called Rujum El Hiri, is investigating a stone circle or a set of stone circles. For the longest time, it was thought to be an astronomical observatory, but more recent studies, literally as recent as January 2nd, 2025, have come out and said it is not an astronomical observatory after all. So that's what we have going on right here.
And what I when I read that article, it said something about the ground having shifted. Is that the reason for that change?
It can be. So the climate back in ancient times is not necessarily the same climate that we are dealing with today. So we even see this, of course, when certain artifacts like ancient fabric or ancient paper or ancient wood that are found, the moment those things are found, just due to when they were made back in antiquity, our air has changed throughout the years, and of course, it affects those types of things, and the ground is no different. There's a lot of geometric analysis and tectonic reconstruction in regards to what this would have looked like at the time that it was built, somewhere between 3000 to 2700 BCE. So they're basically trying to recreate what the terrain possibly would have looked like back during that time.
You put that date range out there. What was that you said?
3000 to 2700 BCE. That's when it was constructed.
Okay. And so from a historical perspective, what's going on during that date range? Do you know, Christy?
So I would say early Bronze Age, late
Okay.
Stone Age at that point. So this will be before Abraham's time, but possibly late Stone Age. So post Noah, pre Abraham. I know the Bible kind of pretty much the only thing that's happening in there at that time that they talk in depth about is like Babel. there were other things obviously happening as well. We can expect possibly very crude stone tools, maybe some early rudimentary copper tools as well before they start adding the tin to make it bronze. Yeah, that's about that time period. So
Okay.
I would say probably safely post Babel, pre Abraham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about the change specifically with the climate between ancient cultures and our own and things that are going on with that way. Do you think we'll ever conclusively know what these sites or site was used for?
I personally think that's one thing with archaeology. There's some stuff we're just not going to know. And that's okay. I'm not saying that we're never going to figure out what this site is for. It's just archaeology can only do so much. You know, we're given 2% of the data or two pieces of the puzzle, really, and try and put together the bigger picture of what does this look like, you know? And so that's kind of the difficulty with archaeology, especially this early on, where very rarely do you find any organic material. There's, most DNA at that point has decomposed if there are any human remains, and so that creates other difficulties. So we might not ever know, or it could be like they used to be very curious as to how Roman women did their hair because it just seemed impossible. And then one woman just looked at a Roman woman's statue, her haircut, and was like looking very closely. And she's like, they sewed it. And so she replicated it with sewing the hair in place, and it was worked perfectly. And then they finally figured out, oh, that's what all these Roman cosmetic tools are for. That's why there's all these really thick needles. This can't work on fabric. It's because it's for hair. And so you never know, even though we don't know what these Golan circles were about right now, it doesn't mean that we're never going to know. It just means maybe that's for another generation of archaeologists to find out.
Things are always changing, and so are we. I mean, that's one of the things here at the Biblical History Center. You might have come here 10 years ago and then revisit us now, and things may be completely or somewhat different from what you remember, and that is valid for the future too. We may change something in the future because research is ongoing, and it's ever ongoing. And so just because something has changed doesn't mean that we were incorrect or the experts were incorrect. It just means that now we have a better understanding of what it is and can piece these puzzle pieces together a little bit better to give you more of an accurate picture. So if you ever see something like that, feel free to ask us, what changed? What was the discovery that helped change that?
And Ben, if I may, I mean, this can be shown in a museum, and especially in signage, right? Like 10 years ago, you might see something on signage that said one thing, but then if you come now, the signage may say something a whole lot different. And it's not that we're not trying to be deceptive. It's just, we're staying up to date on the latest discoveries and how that is impacting how we are showcasing this history.
Absolutely.
We want to be up to date, right?
Absolutely.
We strive to do.
We want the experience to be the best for the guest, and as the experts, have to realize when we need to make changes so that it's the most accurate for them. Moving on, we have our coins. For the listeners, there's a large cache of coins that have been unearthed in the Netherlands, in the lowlands of Europe. And these coins are very, very interesting. Christy, why don't you go ahead and tell us where did these coins come from?
So most of these coins, it's a coin hoard. So it means they're kind of a little bit from all over the place. But the main piece of the hoard is actually from the island of Britannia. It says ancient British coins, but it would just be from that main island. And most of them seem to be bearing the inscription of King, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, everyone who speaks Gaelic, Kuno Baden, while there are other coins as well in there. And it's believed that these were part of military pay. So this is actually really interesting because this coin hoard comes from sometime in the 40s AD. So that's only about 10 years after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. But it was found near a Roman launching point. They knew that in this kind of boggy area, the Romans would often launch from what is now the Netherlands into Britannia for their invasions and for their military conquests. But since these are British coins that have been found now at the launching point, it tells us not only did they launch from here, but they brought back from here spoils of war. This is really just a fantastic collection. I highly recommend Googling it to look at the pictures because you do see some unusual coins in there. There's a lot of gold coins, which those are super rare to actually find because in antiquity, most of them actually would have been confiscated by conquering peoples and melted down or reminted, turned into jewelry, that kind of thing. So the fact that these have lasted for the last 2,000 years is really quite phenomenal. And it's a quite substantial coin hoard as well.
So this is more than likely an individual or individuals as pay experts, the finance department, the ancient finance department of this Roman movement of troops, right? And they're somehow losing this.
This Roman garrison's CFO made a boo-boo.
Yes.
Yes.
The way I imagine it happening is they're coming back from conquest, they're getting out of the boat, they're stepping onto shore, and this guy just slips in the mud, in the bog, in the waves, drops this quite heavy bag, because the total sum that we're looking at here would be equivalent to about 11 years wages.
Oh, wow.
for one person. So
Yeah.
this is quite a significant. It's not just like you drop your paycheck or your pocket change. This is like you dropped your retirement account
Mhm.
in in a bog on accident.
Wow.
So it's quite significant.
Yeah. And Emily, I think you had mentioned to me at some point in time that there wasn't just coins from Britain. Is that right?
Yes. These coins were not just from Britannia, although they do, like Christy said, have the Celtic king Cunobeline on them. Conobelius was actually immortalized by Shakespeare, and I'm probably going to mispronounce the way that Shakespeare has it written in one of his plays. I think it's Cymbeline, and so Shakespeare's immortalized him. But these were not just from Celtic Britain; they were from Algeria and modern day Algeria. But back then, under Roman occupation, it was the kingdom of Numidia as well. So we've
Okay.
got Algerian coins. They've traveled, and every part of the empire had a different coin mint to show what part of the empire it came from.
Pretty interesting about the coin patterns. I know we have some coins here at the Biblical History Center. Roman coins, you see depictions of a Caesar or of a different person's face printed on that coin, and it seems to be the case with some of these Britannia coins. Whereas a lot of times you see in Israelite coins not a face, right? A tree or something like that. So the Britannia coins are kind of a mix of that depiction of the coin there. But altogether, that just to me really points out how much more complex Roman occupations really were than what we typically believe, right? When we watch a movie about a Roman occupation of a certain land, what they are they've been there for years and they're not expecting to leave anytime soon. But this really shows that there's much more elaborate movement of troops through these different regions, and really kind of what I think what Emily was getting ready to say is shows just how massive the Roman Empire was, right? Even at a
Mhm.
time when Christie's dating this, right? At the specific, it's only a decade after Christ, right? You just, when you're reading the Bible, you're not thinking of Rome as invading Britannia while Christ is dying on a cross, right? It doesn't mesh with your mind when you think of it that way, but it is a really fascinating find there that really illuminates the picture of the Roman Empire at such a vital moment for biblical history for sure.
Oh yeah, like that's something that I love to think about when something like this pops up on the radar. Although it's not like this is a common occurrence. This is a very rare type of coin hoard to find, but it's just so interesting to me to think about the fact that on one side of the wild west of the Roman Empire, we have Judea and we have Jesus, death, burial, resurrection, and all of that's happening. And it's one frontier, like their version of cowboys, right?
Yeah,
Is happening. And then on the other edge of that frontier, it's Britannia, and they're fighting Boudica and the Iceni and the other native tribes of Britain, and they're confiscating lands and collecting taxes and waging war, kind of more guerrilla style warfare with these tribes and coming back to mainland Europe with coin hoards like this. It's just a mind-boggling thing to think about.
absolutely. So for our last topic, there was a recent discovery of a bathhouse in Pompeii. As we know, Pompeii is the site of the great eruption of Mount Vesuvius that essentially captures Pompeii in a time vortex, right? It's as if time stood still and the excavations are still ongoing. But as I said recently, they found this bathhouse. Bathhouses are a pretty common thing for Roman culture, and maybe you could explain a bit of what a bathhouse is, a Roman bathhouse.
Absolutely. So a Roman bathhouse is not just a house where you go bathe or a bathing room. So it actually is more like what we would think of as a spa or a gymnasium, like a workout place. It's a gathering place. So typically, if you are going to a Roman bathhouse, you would enter the first room, which is actually a changing room. And you would change out of your clothes for this communal bathing experience. And then you would coat your skin up with oil. You would then go through a series of warm and then hot bathhouse sauna kind of things. You're bathing in hot water, you're bathing in steam. You might possibly put in a workout at this point. You might get a massage, and then you will have a slave or a servant who will take something called a strigil, which kind of just looks like a hook, and you will use that metal hook to scrape off the oil and the sweat and all that from the hot rooms of the house and from your possible workout. Then, once you've kind of cleaned yourself from the oils and the sweat and the grime, you would then go to what's called a frigidarium, which is the cold bath room of the home or the bathhouse. And you would submerge yourself. Some of these pools were as deep as 9 meters, so they could get quite deep. You fully submerge yourself in the cold water. We even find accounts of Romans in the summer hanging out in the heat of the middle of the summer, hanging out in the frigidarium, dipping their toes in the cold water, and just spending a couple hours there in the middle of the day to help keep cool. So it's a series of rooms that you kind of go through, almost labyrinth style, to come out clean and refreshed and ready to go for the rest of your day.
Wow. And that's a pretty common thing for most Romans, I assume, right? This is most Romans would be privy to this kind of bathhouse experience in a communal way, right?
Right. So we even find that middle class Romans would have access to a public bathhouse. And so this is a communal place in the community where everyone of all status really could come together and bathe. There's actually a really amusing story of a Roman senator, I believe, who went to a bathhouse with his multiple slaves, helping him undress, helping him take care of his strigil and his oil and everything. And he saw a man in the corner trying to scratch his own back with the strigil. And so he gifted him a slave on the spot so that he could properly bathe. And then the senator had this problem next time he's coming to the bath. All of these people who are slaveless are pretending that it's really hard for them to reach certain areas with their strigil, hoping that he will gift them a slave. And he's like, oh, I've made a mistake. So, but the point of that story though, is it's not just the upper classes that you're seeing at these public bathhouses. It's the upper class, it's the slaves, it's the middle class. Everyone in the Roman world who was able would go and partake of these baths. Now, the unusual thing about this bath that we're talking about that was recently uncovered in Pompeii is not that it is a bathhouse, because you would expect to see that. The fact that it's a private bathhouse. This is a bathhouse that it was part of somebody's mansion. I can't even say home. It was a mansion, elaborately decorated mansion. So even though the bathhouse, the public bath experience is a normal thing, in some of the upper class homes, like this one, we now know to expect they might have had their own personal bath as well, which kind of makes sense because of the way Roman plumbing worked. Water is being filtered from bath to bath to bath, and I can't even really say filtered. They would consider it very sanitary. We don't, by modern standards, consider it to be very sanitary experience bathing in public with 40 other people, So the fact that they had a private one in their home indicates their status and wealth of these individuals in Pompeii.
And I think that's something that Emily was really keyed in on when she was showing me this article originally, was just the exception of it being a private bathhouse and what it entailed. Emily, what were some of those highlights that you were telling me about?
First and foremost is wow. So in regards to Christy explaining the setup and what a typical day at the baths would have looked like, whether again you're part of the upper, middle, lower classes, if you're a Roman citizen, you are going to have access to this. But the fact that this is in someone's private residence, like Christy said, basically it's a mansion. It just shows you how much wealth this person had. The fact that they could have their own changing room, hot room, frigidarium, cold room, all of these things in their private residence, it really speaks to the vast amounts of wealth that they had. I highly recommend y'all Google this bathhouse and some of the pictures from an article from the BBC that came out about this, or that came out, because the photos are stunning. I don't think the photos do justice to what the team found, working on this found. Just the changing room itself, where you would remove your clothing before you went to bathe. After 2,000 years, despite the eruption, beautiful, brilliant red paint. Absolutely stunning. Looks like they had just put a fresh coat on before the eruption. And even the floor of the changing room, this also attributes to the person's wealth. They had pieces of marble from every corner of the Roman Empire in that time period. And that costs money to import that high quality of marble product. So just the changing room alone describes the wealth that these people had. It was absolutely stunning.
Some of the photos, like you're saying, from that article were really kind of amazing. Again, I think it's a unique thing with Pompeii, right? This terrible tragedy of the eruption was absolutely horrible for the residents of Pompeii, right? But it's wonderful for us, unfortunate for them, right? It's as if the people had just left, right? They covered it up and left, which reminds me of the two skeletons, I believe. Was it two or three skeletons that were found,
two.
Emily?
Two.
It was two.
Okay, and there was some specifics with them as well that kind of identified them, wasn't there?
Yes. So first, one of the first skeletons that was found was the body of a woman. She was aged between 35 to 50. Her bones, and the thing is, when you look at the bodies of ancient people, through death, you can learn a lot about a person's life. So if you look at the teeth, that can tell you if a person had a certain kind of disease, what their diet was like. And if you look at the wear and tear on the bones, it can tell you if they were a person who experienced a lot of labor, or if they had a life of comfort and they didn't have to exercise the labor intensive stuff. And the body of this woman, even though she was between 35 to 50, she was clutching jewelry and coins, and her bones revealed that she did not have a lot of wear and tear, which means she's a woman of high status. She's got people to do things for her. And she was clutching these jewelry and her coins. The earrings, there was some earrings that were found with her. The earrings look like they're beautiful gold earrings with mother of pearl. They look like earrings that women today would have in their jewelry box. But they were very valuable to her. Maybe she was wearing them for that day. But the coins also, coins are a good find because they can tell you, a lot of things, the time period, the ruler, even where the coin was minted as well. And then the young man that was found with her, he was in his early 20s, but his bones compared to the lady's bones showed a lot of wear, a lot of tear. And so this means he was more than likely a part of the lower class. Some are even theorizing that this is a lady of the home, the mistress, and a slave of hers that was trapped inside the room with her as the eruption was happening. So it just shows you the vast difference as well in the class system of ancient Rome, the rich and the poor as well. So the young man that was found with the ladies, while the woman was holding some jewelry and some coins, the young man had a quote unquote possession as well. He held a set of keys, and it was very common in Roman homes at the time for the matron of the home to have a designated slave who could oversee all of the tasks. Like the mistress would give him the tasks, but she would assign the slaves tasks, but it was the job of this one slave to make sure everybody was doing their job according to the master and mistress's requirements. So it's very likely this young man, was the literal keeper of the keys to the home as well.
That's pretty interesting. The difference there. It's interesting that we can tell the difference between the classes just because of bone structure. That's absolutely fascinating. But to see that the possible house matron and the possible slave were both next to each other in their last moments, just how equalized life really is, right? There wasn't a difference for who they were or their status when the volcano erupted and the pyroclastic flow came down the mountain, freezing them in time next to each other, right? The only reason we know the difference is because of their bone structure and the things that they had on them. Speaking of that house, though, the mosaic that you described, mosaics are, as we all know, are a pretty common thing for the Roman Empire in general. We find mosaics all over the place. It seems like every other month, if not every month, they're finding a new mosaic in places like Turkey. And we also have mosaics here, recreations of these wonderful mosaics. We have them in the front and in our artifact gallery as well. Mosaics is truly a piece of art.
One cool thing that I love about these new discoveries that are coming out of Pompeii is that we can learn so much more about the ancient world and daily life and include that in the museum and update our museum and our exhibits to make them more accurate, more interesting, and more colorful for our guests. One area where we've done this, and it ties in with the Roman bath that we just talked about, is the fast food stalls that we have in our ancient agora, our ancient marketplace. Those frescoes, that art on those exhibits is basically copy paste almost exactly from what was uncovered in the ancient food stalls in Pompeii. Originally, they were thought to just be brown and plain, as most of the ones that were uncovered were that way. But it's just because over time, the frescoes deteriorated, they crumbled off, they washed out, they faded, but we now know that they probably would have been covered with these colorful, beautiful pieces of art. We did modify them a little bit to fit our needs. One fresco depicts Aphrodite rising out of the sea on a hippocamp, which is a half horse, half fish. It's like a horse mermaid kind of thing. She's rising out of the sea. The one thing we did change about that fresco was we put clothes on Aphrodite because we have a lot of field trip groups that come through. And then one thing that we changed on the other fast food stall is that instead of displaying ducks like the original fresco, we displayed fish because our stall already had fish on display there in the exhibit. And we noticed in the archaeology that we think the fresco is supposed to depict what the food that they were selling was, almost like an ancient billboard or an ancient advertisement, like, hey, look at, this is the food that I've got to sell, come on up and buy. So we modified that one a little bit for our purposes as well. But it's just so neat how, because of these new discoveries coming out of Pompeii, we can use them to educate our guests. And so look next time you come to BHC for these frescoes fresh out of Pompeii.
Which reminds me, as we get to the end of our program here, folks, please be sure to mark your calendars for May 10th. That's May 10th, 2025. We will be hosting Roman Army Day. It's a wonderful event. Christy, maybe you could explain a little bit about Roman Army Day for us.
Of course. So Roman Army Day is our one living history day that we have every single year. It's usually held in May. The only time there was an exception to this was during COVID. When it first hit, we postponed it until October. But this year it is going to be Saturday, May 10th. And so Roman soldiers come and camp out and literally take over the museum for a weekend. They basically set up camp here. Not even basically, they literally set up camp in our garden and camp out for the weekend. And you can see all of their armor, their weaponry. They set up a boot camp for the kids, which is always a lot of fun to see them work out like the Romans used to. We'll have live animals that are from biblical lands and biblical times that you can see and pet and interact with. We're going to have live performances on the stage of our Roman theater, as well as weapons and armor demonstrations and explanations. We're also going to have vendors from the local community come in and set up shop in our marketplace. We usually have a blacksmith and a jeweler and a soap maker, several other local artisans, just like they would have had in ancient times. And you can come and purchase wares from them, just like you would have been able to in an actual ancient marketplace in ancient Israel. So we ask you to come, be ready to learn, be ready to have fun. This is a real day of hands-on learning, and it's one of my favorite days at the Biblical History Center every single year. So we hope you'll join us.
Absolutely. We really do hope to see you there. We know this is Mother's Day weekend, but bring your mom. Bring your mom too. And we'd be happy to.
And I would love to be taken to this for Mother's Day.
Absolutely.
Same here.
We'll be happy to greet your mother as a mom and wish her a happy Mother's Day. But again, we really hope to see you there. For a complete list of our upcoming events, programs, and more information, please visit biblicalhistorycenter.com. That's biblicalhistorycenter.com. Christy and Emily, thank you both so much for being here today. We really appreciate all the hard work you do.
It's our pleasure. Happy to be here today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. From the Dust of History is a production of the Biblical History Center in LaGrange, Georgia. We want to extend our heartfelt thanks to our donors and supporters for your generosity. Your generosity makes all of this possible. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. That is going to do it for the day. This is From the Dust of History, signing out. As always, stay safe and have a great one.